It was Valentine's Day in Oklahoma City, a day most people spend showing love. Susan Hamilton was getting ready to leave the house. Her hair was still wet and she was fully dressed. Everything seemed normal, but something terrible happened. A short time later, her husband, Dr. John Hamilton, called 911 in a panic. What the police found inside their home was shocking. There was no break-in, nothing was stolen, just a violent crime, and a lot of unanswered questions. At first, no one knew what to think. But as police looked closer, John's story started to fall apart. Was this a random attack? Or was the truth much closer to home? This is the story of a marriage that looked perfect until the truth came out. If you're a fan of true crime and criminal investigations, you won't want to miss our new book, The Ultimate Book of Serial Killers: 180 Files of the World's Most Notorious Murderers, now available on Amazon. You can also purchase the PDF version directly from our website for instant download. You'll find the link in the video description and in a pinned comment. Now, let's dive into today's case. In the heart of Oklahoma City, a love story began that would captivate and later shock an entire community. It started in 1985 when Susan, a single mother and devout Christian, was working as a nurse. She was a woman known for her warmth, integrity, and commitment to her faith. At a medical event that same year, her path crossed with Dr. John Hamilton, a highly regarded obstetrician and gynecologist. John was already a father and a respected figure in the medical field, admired for his confidence, charm, and intense dedication to his work. The connection between them was immediate. John was drawn to Susan's gentle nature and her unwavering values. She, in turn, found in John a supportive, attentive partner. Within 2 years, in 1987, they were married. Together, they built a life that many considered idyllic. Their home, a grand, elegant house in one of Oklahoma City's upscale neighborhoods, reflected the comfort and prosperity John's thriving medical practice provided. While John's clinic, where he specialized in women's reproductive health, was just a short drive from home, Susan had left her nursing job behind to focus on their marriage and their shared life. She poured her time into her community and church, quickly becoming a respected and active member of both. To outsiders, John and Susan Hamilton appeared to have it all. Their relationship seemed joyful and affectionate. They were often seen together, enjoying lavish vacations, romantic outings, and a lifestyle full of luxury. John was especially generous with gifts, buying Susan expensive jewelry, high-end cars, including a Porsche, and designer items that showcased not just their wealth but his devotion. He was attentive, caring, and spared no effort in making Susan feel adored. And Susan, by all accounts, loved him just as deeply. Their marriage endured for over 15 years, marked by both shared accomplishments and private challenges. Still, they remained deeply committed. Though they didn't have children together, John already had a family from a previous relationship. They embraced their time as a couple, making the most of their financial success and emotional connection. Yet beneath that picture-perfect surface, cracks would eventually form, and what seemed like a fairy tale would soon take a dark and tragic turn, one that no amount of wealth, love, or reputation could prevent. Over time, John became a central figure in the abortion debate. In addition to delivering babies and treating women's health issues, he also performed abortions at a local clinic. In conservative Oklahoma, this part of his career brought not only moral opposition, but personal danger. Activists regularly gathered outside his clinic, waving signs, distributing inflammatory flyers, and circulating his name and photo in efforts to shame or intimidate him. But the harassment didn't stop there. The hostility followed him home. Susan, his wife of more than a decade, began receiving disturbing phone calls. Some messages were so threatening that she reportedly feared for her life. Even with this cloud of fear hanging over them, the Hamiltons worked hard to maintain their image. They hosted elegant parties, remained active in their community, and lived what appeared to be a picture-perfect life. John never stopped showing affection for Susan. Every Valentine's Day, no matter how many years passed, was treated like a sacred occasion. It was their tradition to exchange heartfelt cards and small gifts, a ritual that never lost its romance. In 2001, there was no reason to believe it would be any different. That morning, February 14th, John started his day with work, leaving around 7 a.m. to perform surgery at the hospital. He was dressed in street clothes, which he swapped for scrubs upon arrival. At 8:40 a.m., following the first procedure, he returned home briefly. According to John, he left a bouquet of flowers and a Valentine's card for Susan before heading back out for his second surgery of the morning. He claimed that she wasn't home at the time. But when he returned again later that morning, everything changed. John noticed something was off. The door was ajar, an unusual sight. Inside, the house was silent, uncomfortably still. As he walked through, nothing could prepare him for what he found next. Lying on the bathroom floor was Susan. She was covered in blood. Her injuries were horrifying. She had been strangled with two of John's own neckties. Her skull had been crushed with such force that brain matter was exposed. The murder weapon was never recovered. In a panic, John called 911. His voice trembled with desperation as he begged for help. "Please, send police. Please send an ambulance. I think my wife is dead," he cried, claiming he had tried CPR but couldn't revive her. Emergency responders arrived within minutes. What they walked into was a nightmare. The scene suggested unfiltered rage. Blood was everywhere. It wasn't just an act of murder, it was overkill. The brutality pointed toward someone who had harbored deep, personal hatred for Susan. But who could feel that way about a woman so universally admired? Officers quickly took note of details that didn't sit right. Both of the couple's cars were parked in the driveway. Inside, John's shirt and shoes were soaked in blood. Blood traces were also discovered in his car. Investigators couldn't ignore the inconsistencies nor the overwhelming violence. At first, it made no sense. John and Susan had always seemed like the ideal couple. Loving, successful, generous. Their life looked like something out of a magazine. But the truth was far darker than anyone imagined, and by the end of that day, Valentine's Day would no longer be a symbol of romance. It would mark the beginning of a shocking investigation that tore apart everything the community thought it knew about John and Susan Hamilton. It didn't take long for suspicion to fall on her husband, Dr. John Hamilton. As the last known person to see her alive and the one who discovered her body, John quickly became the prime suspect. That same evening, police arrested him. From the beginning, John's behavior raised eyebrows. During questioning, he appeared deeply distressed, His hands shook, he couldn't stay still, and at times he seemed inconsolable. To some, it looked like a man broken by grief, but to others, it felt rehearsed. His erratic demeanor made it difficult to separate genuine anguish from potential guilt. Investigators ruled out robbery almost immediately. Though the front door had been left open, an unusual sight in their affluent neighborhood, nothing valuable was taken. The home was full of expensive items, luxury jewelry, electronics, fine art, all untouched. There were no signs of forced entry, but one thing was missing: a small marble figurine from the bathroom. Detectives speculated that it may have been used to bludgeon Susan, but the figurine was never found. Without a clear motive or an outside suspect, investigators looked into other possibilities. Could the murder have been politically motivated? John's work as an abortion provider had brought threats and protests, and the couple had been publicly targeted. But despite this theory, there was no solid evidence linking the crime to any of the protesters. No eyewitnesses, no break-in, no trail. The breakthrough came in the form of something far more personal: a Valentine's Day card. During a search of the Hamilton home, police discovered the card Susan had written for John. What should have been a simple love note turned out to be something else entirely. Her message read, "Obviously, I bought this before last Monday, so I guess now it doesn't seem as appropriate. I do still love you, though. Have a good day. Susan." To detectives, this was a red flag. What had happened the Monday before? What made her feel the card was no longer appropriate? The questions mounted. The card's tone, conflicted, distant, stood in sharp contrast to the affectionate image the couple portrayed. Soon, whispers of a hidden truth began to surface. One of Susan's closest friends confided in police. John, she believed, had been having an affair. The revelation cracked the image of the devoted husband and exposed something much darker. Susan herself had told her daughter that she felt suffocated in the marriage. She described her relationship as one-sided, with everything revolving around John. He demanded attention, dismissed her feelings, and left her feeling invisible. She had even admitted she was thinking about leaving him. The ideal marriage the public had admired was now being exposed as a fragile illusion. Detectives dug deeper, and what they found painted an even more troubling picture. Susan had discovered phone records, more than 60 calls, all to the same woman, a stripper who worked at a nearby club. Susan printed the records out and confronted John. He denied everything, insisting the woman was just a hospital patient. But Susan didn't believe him. In fact, she told a friend she had confronted her husband and was planning to file for divorce. That might have been the last straw. As the investigation progressed, it became clear that Susan had been preparing to break free from a marriage that no longer served her. And John? He stood to lose not only his wife, but his reputation, his lifestyle, and possibly even his career. By the time February 14th arrived, the Valentine's Day ritual that had once symbolized enduring love now masked the bitter truth of a relationship on the verge of collapse. What had once seemed like an act of devotion, flowers, a card, a visit home, may have been a desperate attempt to hold together something that had already unraveled. Behind the grand home, the lavish gifts, and the perfect public image was a storm quietly brewing. And when it finally broke, it left behind a scene so violent, so personal, that the truth could no longer be ignored. As the investigation into Susan Hamilton's brutal murder deepened, a darker portrait of John Hamilton began to take shape. Beneath John's polished image and respected career was a man desperate to protect what he valued most: his reputation. A looming divorce, compounded by a public affair, threatened to destroy everything John had built. He initially denied any romantic involvement with the woman Susan had suspected, claiming she was simply a patient. But the truth caught up with him. Investigators uncovered that he had visited her frequently at the strip club where she worked, and she had performed private dances for him. Despite mounting evidence, John clung to the claim that nothing physical had occurred between them. It was a weak defense. One detail stood out. A letter John had written to the woman stating that he could no longer serve as her doctor. It may have looked like a severing of ties, but it raised questions. Was he trying to win back Susan's trust, or was he simply manipulating the situation to delay a divorce? To police, it looked like damage control. The story captivated the media. Reporters swarmed the case, sensing there was more than met the eye. One local station even sent the 911 call John made to a voice stress analyst. The findings were startling. His voice, according to the analysis, carried minimal stress, unusual for someone who had just discovered his wife's mutilated body. It suggested not panic or heartbreak, but control, almost as if he had rehearsed what to say. The discrepancies didn't end there. John had told emergency responders he'd attempted CPR, but investigators were skeptical. There was no blood on his mouth or face. Given the severity of Susan's head trauma, any real attempt at resuscitation should have left him covered. Instead, the blood spatter told a different story. Forensic analysis revealed that the blood on John's shirt and shoes belonged to Susan. More damning, however, was the discovery of her blood and tissue inside his car, far more than initially believed. John claimed he had moved his car to make room for paramedics, but this explanation fell apart under scrutiny. The presence of tissue fragments strongly suggested that Susan had been in the vehicle post-injury, or that John had transferred evidence after the murder. To get clarity, investigators turned to a top blood spatter expert. The distribution of blood on John's clothing didn't align with the version of events he'd given. It didn't resemble a man who had stumbled upon a crime scene and rushed to help. It resembled someone who had been at the center of the violence. The working theory was grim. John, in a moment of rage or desperation, attempted to strangle Susan using his own neckties. But when she struggled, he escalated. He struck her in the head with a blunt object, possibly the missing marble figurine. Once she was down, he crushed her skull with extreme force. It was a murder marked by overkill, by fury, not a random act, not a robbery, but something personal, something intimate. The evidence was stacking up. The affair, the blood, the stress analysis, the missing figurine, and a motive as old as time: ego, pride, and the desperate desire to avoid shame. It turned out the marriage had been strained long before that tragic day. On the morning of the murder, after completing his first surgery, John returned home, not simply to drop off flowers and a Valentine's Day card, as he had claimed, but to confront Susan. The argument that followed would mark the end of their marriage in the most violent way imaginable. According to the reconstructed timeline, Susan had been getting ready to leave the house for a 9:30 a.m. appointment with a friend. She was found fully dressed, her hair still damp, clear signs that she had been preparing to head out. But she never made it. Detectives uncovered a crucial detail in John's hospital schedule. His second surgery was due to begin at 9 a.m., yet he didn't show up until 9:38. Staff had even sent someone to look for him, noting the delay. In those 30 unexplained minutes, John had time to carry out the murder. He had expected more time to clean the scene, but the sudden call back to the hospital interrupted him. Panicked, he changed out of his blood-stained clothes and returned to work, just in time for surgery, calm, focused, and professional, as though nothing had happened. Hours later, when he called 911, He put on a show of despair, but for investigators, it was already too late. The truth had begun to surface. The proximity of their home to the hospital played a vital role in the case. It made it clear that John could have committed the crime and still made it back in time for surgery. More importantly, it eliminated the chance that someone else could have entered the house in the narrow window between John's departure and Susan's scheduled outing. There simply wasn't time for a third party to commit the crime unnoticed. During trial preparations, John's defense team hired a blood spatter expert to examine the evidence. It was a risky move that backfired spectacularly. On the stand, when asked if the prosecution had overlooked anything significant, the expert dropped a bombshell. He had discovered bloodstains on the inside sleeve of John's shirt, patterns consistent with impact from a blunt force trauma. Even though he had been hired to help the defense, the expert couldn't ignore the truth. His analysis confirmed what prosecutors already suspected. The blood had gotten there at the precise moment Susan was struck. There was no other plausible explanation. This was the final blow to John Hamilton's story. In the courtroom, the evidence painted a chilling picture of calculated rage. The motive? A failing marriage, an exposed affair, and a looming divorce that threatened to destroy John's reputation. The jury didn't hesitate. John Hamilton was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole. On top of that, he was ordered to pay over $11,000 to cover his incarceration costs. It was a landmark case, the first of its kind in the county, and it left a lasting impact. John has since filed multiple appeals, all of which have been denied. He has never confessed to the murder. To this day, he maintains his innocence, and a small group of supporters still believe he was wrongfully convicted. But the question remains, was justice served, or is there more to this story than anyone realized? Let us know what you think. Did John Hamilton deserve life in prison? Or was this a case of circumstantial evidence taken too far? Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.